Across to the conference and speak to our reporter, Clovis Casali. Clovis, talk us through what's happening today and how significant this conference is being seen as.
Good morning, Gavin. Delegations are expected to arrive here at the presidential palace, the Élysée, in less than an hour. In this delegation, you have the Prime Minister of the Palestinian authorities, as well as key ministers from the region, foreign ministers, as well as the international figures involved in trying to deal with this humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Several key UN figures, notably. The day will start with an opening declaration, remarks made by French President Emmanuel Macron, but as well words from Martin Griffith, who's the head of humanitarian affairs at the UN, trying to work on the situation in Gaza with those thousands and thousands of civilians still trapped in the Gaza Strip. Emmanuel Macron then, at the end of this humanitarian conference, is set, according to the Élysée, that's what we're told, is set to announce a set of substantial financial measures, much needed cash, extra cash to help those civilians. And of course, all eyes will be on the various actors, what they have to say. The discussions will be taking place behind closed doors, and the Élysée tells us they won't necessarily be a closing statement, but the French president wants real pragmatic approach here. He wants clear measures taken, and he can't take those measures alone. He really needs to discuss the matter with all the key actors from the region.
We talk about the dire need for civilians, Clovis, and I think we're talking about just over 700 lorries going in through the Rafah crossing via Egypt, and a plan being coordinated by some aid organisations there. Tell us about why Emmanuel Macron wanted to bring about this summit, what he hopes to achieve is perhaps different to that.
Well, it's interesting to see that Emmanuel Macron wanted to organise this conference, really focusing on the humanitarian efforts, but it was a last-minute effort. The Élysée has been working on this for the past few days and has been struggling really to convince presidents from the region to come. That's why you'll have more of foreign ministers. Difficult to get everyone around the table of discussions. The Israelis, for instance, won't be here. But President Emmanuel Macron has been speaking with Binyamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, yesterday, or day before yesterday, and will be especially calling him just after the conference ends to present him with the conclusions of this conference. The question is, how can you bring humanitarian aid into Gaza if the Israelis are opposed to it? How can you bring aid to those the people of Gaza who are struggling under the bombs of Sahel if there is no ceasefire, or at least a humanitarian pause? So surely the participants here, notably the UN, who've been so vocal in the past about the need to bring in aid, how do they convey their message? Will Israel agree ultimately to a humanitarian pause? That's, of course, the question. France and many other countries have been calling for a pause, not necessarily a ceasefire, as many leaders believe that a ceasefire would allow Hamas to strengthen, to reinforce itself, to prepare itself to fight Sahel, but at least a humanitarian pause would be essential if the UN can bring that aid into Gaza. The question of fuel, that's an important point, of course. Israel still opposed to bringing fuel into Gaza, saying that it will only help the fighters of Hamas. So those are some of the questions that need to be addressed during this humanitarian conference, bringing about several key figures, notably the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority and Martin Griffith, the head of humanitarian affairs of the United Nations.